Carlton King, the former Scotland Yard Special Branch and MI6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
I was undercover for Special Branch in jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy podcast, the show that shines a light on the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations. But really, as I'm now saying more and more, if we look at geopolitics, we look at the totality of the political world which surrounds us. And obviously the secret world plays absolutely into that in all its veins and all its aspects. But, you know, because I've got my partner in crime with me, as per normal, we also kind of look at it from the angle of the media, because my belief is, rightly or wrongly, that they have as much influence on you, that's you listening, I don't care where you are in the world, than anybody else. Now, that can be because the politicians are feeding them a message, and sometimes they pick it up and run with it if they so wish. And the other times it can be because the politician is actually dictating the message, which has been dictated behind the scenes to them by the media. So it's a strange one. It's like a 360-degree thing. And I'll give you two examples of that. I can remember being on a protection operation and we set it up and we were going to go to South Africa, I believe it was. Yep, South Africa on this one. And it was all set up and I'd been there, we'd spoken with the president's people of South Africa, etc., etc. It was all going to happen. And then something happened in the press. The truth of the matter was that the people that we'd have taken with us from the press were no longer interested. So the meeting was cancelled. So a whole thing had been set up by the embassy, by the British embassy, what we were going to do, where we were going to go, what was going to happen. You know, we'd been out to look at it, make sure it was all safe, etc., etc., etc. And all of that was disbanded basically at the whim of the press. Another one, which I say, in Afghanistan, and a famous BBC press guy was there, and we were trying to move between corridors with the Secretary of State for Defence, extremely dangerous, down by Kajaki Dam and around those areas, and you know, I'd got a big old body of people behind me. I was working with our Special Forces and with the Marines. That's obviously the Royal Marines, who were stationed there, and some army units and the Air Force providing air cover, etc., etc. And then there was a problem with the reporter. And again, it kind of just, well, I guess we can say really slid away, the whole reason. We did the thing, but the reason for it had been lost because the reporter wasn't there. So the reality is, I can see behind the scenes that these guys are more important, or as important, as the politician. So that's why my sidekick is extremely important. And here she is again. Good evening, actually. Good evening to you, Fergus. How are you today?
I'm all right. I'm good. So apart from the fact that you can't buy tomatoes and cucumbers in Britain, everybody for the last 3 weeks, in fact, since the 27th of January, has been talking about one, unfortunately, now confirmed tragic case, which is that of Nicola Bulley. Now, I'd like to start this off by saying that you and I obviously offer our condolences to her family. And in the landscape of the case and the current situation, we're not here to unravel the case. We're not here to pick it apart. We're not here to talk about the whys and wherefores, really, because, well, you know, it is a tragedy. What I'd like to talk about is the fact that in this particular situation, we had the case was the situation was presented. It was, you know, it was on TV. She was a missing person. The story was reported that she dropped her children off to school. She'd walked her dog. She was connected to a work meeting, and you know, let the dog off the lead and was never seen again. Now, over the 3 weeks that it obviously took them to recover and then identify the body, there were so many twists and turns to this case that even I was saying to you, Carlton, let's talk about this. And at the start, I was saying
no, wasn't I?
Yes, you were. And you were right. And you were right.
I just want to put that in place.
Yes, absolutely. But I wasn't alone. So many individuals' curiosity was piqued.
Correct.
Ranging from have-a-go detectives who were filming themselves and posting it on TikTok, digging up the local woodlands in order to try and find, through to conspiracy theorists who were misquoting the partner or the family, or, you know, coming up with alternatives or asking, you know, asking lots of questions and putting their own theories to them. And then the guy who was the police diver had said, after doing a really thorough investigation of to be fair, the section of the river that he was asked to look at and not finding a body, and he was saying, you know, I'm convinced she's not down there because I've searched this space. Now, again, you know, he was just talking in context. He was asked to search a certain amount of space, and he said he couldn't find her. And then her partner was saying, you know, I'm convinced that she's not in the river. But the whole time the police kept saying, no, our first line of investigation is that she's there, and we don't consider this to be suspicious, and, you know, we think she's in the river. So we were at a situation about a week into this case where the media was just a frenzy, you know.
I like the word frenzy. Carry on.
But it really was because the press kind of believed that something was being held from them. The family was saying, you know, that the narrative that the media was replaying on behalf of the family was, she's not in the river. The police are saying she's in the river, but she's not in the river. And then, you know, as a result, you had all these kind of, I mean, I say kind of have a go heroes and social media sort of would-be detectives, I suppose. But, you know, for better or for worse, I think they were genuinely thinking that they might have another angle on this, because the narrative that the police were giving was so cut and dry, you know.
No, it wasn't, though. It wasn't cut and dry.
Well,
please continue. It wasn't cut and dry.
It was in the first place, though, because the police only, you know, were saying that their primary line of investigation was that she was in the river.
Correct. You just said it. The primary line of investigation.
But then 17 days in, they obviously came out with this announcement where they disclosed, obviously, lots of personal issues about her.
Not lots. Not lots.
Okay, two. And look, let's name them. Let's call them out. They said that she had issues with alcohol and that she was menopausal.
Right.
Neither,
But you see, that's not what they said. This is going to be a fantastic show, because this is going to be the focus of journalism against policing. Now, I'm going to put my cap in the arena, and I'm going to state what I think about modern day policing, what I think about it. And then I'd like for you to put your cap in the arena and say what you think about modern day journalism. Now, notice on both accounts, ladies and gentlemen, I said modern day. Right. So first thing, I will say this. The big story really about the police over the last 15 years, I don't want to over egg it, 15 years, is its fall from grace, right? As people perceive it. It was a profession that a lot of people who were of the working class and then latterly the middle class potentially wanted to run into and thought, yeah, that's something worth doing. For the working class, it would be a way up. And for the middle class, it would be a standard way of keeping the reputation. And generally, those from the middle classes who joined hoped to probably gain rank and be a high ranking officer. Now, the first thing has to be said, because we were looking at this whole thing from a very, very wide range and then zooming in to Nicola Bulley. The first thing that needs to be said is that in the British police, the vast majority of people start off as constables and remain as constables. That's the first thing. And most people don't understand that. So you can have a very capable person who is a constable, and just because they've been in 20 years and is still a constable doesn't mean that they're no good. It just means that maybe they failed the science exams, maybe they didn't want to do the science exams, which is the next rank up. Maybe they didn't want to do it because they thought that was what was interesting. Maybe they specialised and went into, say, CID and enjoyed being a detective constable. It is not a higher rank. You do not raise rank in Britain. A detective rank is not higher than a uniform rank. It's exactly the same rank. It's just that you are specialising. Like your guy who became a diver. You specialise to be a diver. And they now have the Northwest Regional Diving Unit. The METS unit could obviously stand for itself because Metropolitan Police has a load of things that go on through rivers all the time. So it could, with its 50-odd thousand people altogether, could actually sustain its own unit. But for most of the smaller counties with 2,500 people, 3,000 people in their police force, they couldn't sustain it. So, the divers were doing, if you got to be the diving job, that would be you doing the diving job. Once you got rank, unless you became the sergeant in charge of the diving team, you would no longer be a diver. So for many people, they thought, yeah, I want to stay as a diver. And that went the same for firearms units. That was the same for even to some extent driving. So for a lot of people, they've stayed as a constable in that rank. It doesn't mean that they're not good. That's what they did, and particularly if you specialised. So I add that because do not misunderstand and think that only the people with the rank are running the operations and only the people with the rank understand what they're doing. And that's totally wrong. In many cases, it can be, in fact, that the people with the rank have actually only orientated themselves to rank and therefore never really learnt the job properly. And that's what I think actually is one of the biggest problems of the British police, that the people at the highest levels have never really learnt the job. So they've rushed through the ranks because that's what they wanted to do. They had no interest in being whatever in the CID or in counterintelligence or whatever particular role. They've rushed through the ranks and then been given roles that they don't understand. And actually the more junior officers are leading them because they don't know what they're doing. Oftentimes that is the case. So I say this because it could be opportune to this case. I don't think it is, but it could be. So that's that. Also, the media has taken a swipe at the police, as I said, for probably 30 odd years, but definitely for the last 15, and hit the police heavily. And the reputation has fallen down the ladder. It really has. It's tumbled. It's like snakes and ladders. It's tumbled down the ladder, the reputation of the police. So much so that they're trying to recruit 20,000 police. You know that since the time that our esteemed Prime Minister, who committed 2 or 3, 4 criminal offences, who it allegedly has had money obtained whilst in office, etc., etc., etc. Yeah. It's been borrowed or whatever, or lent to him, or he had his furniture done, or whatever it was, allegedly, and he still, by many, looked on as very positive. But believe me, if a policeman or woman, and indeed now we're getting to the point where there's as many policewomen as there are men, if a police officer would have done one of the things that he's done, oftentimes they'd have been out of the job. They'd have just thrown them out. So you see, this is the juxtaposition we've got now, with the police being held higher to account for just carrying out the laws which other people make than the people who actually create the laws. The people who create the laws seem to do what they wish to do, and there's no problem for doing it. But the people who just carry them out, are thrown out for very little. Now, so let's come back in. As I said, we're going to tighten in to Miss Bulley. So a big question I have to ask you in the very first instance is why, and no disrespect now at all, why was this case more important than the 400,000, yes, I'm going to say it again, on average, 400,000 reported missing persons every year? That's what I'm just going to ask you on this one now. Straight away, as we come out of the blocks, I'm going to ask you this, Fergus. Why is this case taken on more view than the 400,000 other reported missing persons? Yes, some of those are found quite quickly, but there's thousands a year go missing and never found. So why is this one taking on a great importance? Can I ask you?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I would have probably led with the same opening argument because as we know, unfortunately, there people take their lives or are reported missing and never found at a vast extent on a daily basis. So my kind of I would have started this off by also saying, why was this so interesting to the media in the first place?
Yes. Exactly.
We're coming from the same opening gambit. What I would say is, and obviously Lancashire Police are being investigated on a number of accounts for this, but also so are the press, and so is TikTok, and so are Meta and Google and other social media platforms. What's interesting to me is that, and again, not laying blame. This, I'm just calling it as I see it. This became a situation of incredible, enormous public interest. Mm-hmm. Whether that was on social media, whether that was people watching the news, whether that was local residents putting the yellow ribbons around the bridge or putting out the daffodils, or whether that was people trying to piece together that what they thought might have happened in their head. Mm-hmm. The family, the most recent statement from the family is that they are they're accusing ITV and Sky News of an invasion of privacy that shouldn't have happened because they'd asked for their privacy to be respected when the body had been found, and those two media giants hadn't respected that level of privacy. I think that's all right.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Now, what's interesting to me is that from the get-go, Sky News in particular have had what they describe as an open dialogue with the family. Right? From the get-go, the family has used the media as a tool to try and ask for help. When the partner was saying, I don't believe she's in the river, and when the local residents were holding up placards asking for dash cam footage, they were using the media as a tool to promote that.
Correct.
To all intents and purposes for good.
But the media bites you, doesn't it?
Yeah. Now, where I feel like the rogue element here, because this is neither me nor you, was the social media angle. And actually there've been former there's been a lot of narrative from media quoted former police detectives using the phrase, TikTok dictated this investigation. And, social media was allowed to take far more control than should have happened.
Mm-hmm.
Which is also true.
I'm going to come back at you a touch. Can I come back at you at this moment? Just a touch. Because you see, because I think this is what I said in my brief overview to the beginning. I think actually there's various elements of media and they're all happy to blame some other aspect of it. So the BBC comes on and it says TikTok's doing this, TikTok's doing whatever. Sky comes on, TikTok doing this, TikTok doing whatever. ITV doing the same. But they were all doing it. They were really well respected. One person, example, a female reporter, and that is important, who was, I think, New Statesman, something like that, one of these top rags that they have, and basically what she was saying is that the senior investigating officer, a woman, right, went on in a dress to show off her physique. She was showing off her physique and was not bothered about the case. That's not TikTok. That was not on TikTok. She put it out on Twitter. But also, apparently, it was also fed in the newspaper that she runs, or the magazine that she runs. So what I'm saying is, journalists of all ilks were out basically stating this and this and this is wrong. Now, she actually said she wore a cocktail dress. She wore a cocktail dress. True, but it's ridiculous. She wore a normal dress to work and was as professional as you could be. Now, the problem is, why this downer on her? Because she's a policewoman, a senior police officer doing her job. Why was this downer on her? Why? When she was stating very, very clear, clip and clear, this is what we believe and this is where I am centering my investigation. But for whatever reason, she's hated. Tell me why the media was like that.
Yeah, yes. Well, okay. I'm just going to, I will come back to you on this point because it's part of a bigger point about Nicola. But just to rewind a little bit,
sure.
The difference between an editor and a TikToker is that an editor is actually accountable. That there are...
I wonder sometimes.
Yes, you might do, but actually... You'd be surprised.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. And again, you see, you and me, on this one, we're way apart. Generally, we're actually pretty much together. I'll tell you why. How can the most prestigious editor, and I'm going to go back some years, and we've talked about it, and I know you worked for her, right? How can the most prestigious editor get some information about the royal family, get some information about A-grade actors, get some information about top politicians, editor, right? And not ask, where's this information coming from? So when I put it in my paper, I'm not going to be sued because it's 100% right. And you know what I'm talking about. You know,
absolutely, and
explain to the people what I'm talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about, because if you're an editor and you get information from your writers, your leader writers, whomever they are, from your journalists, surely because it's your paper and the owner puts all their control into you to say make sure this paper runs well, and you don't do and this is her saying that. She never checked, supposedly. You don't do the basics of checking where stories are from about the royal family. You don't do the basics of checking where stories are from about the most senior politicians in the country, or where stories are coming from about A-list actors who've got plenty of money to sue you. You're trying to tell me you don't check and ask where they are, and we're meant to believe that?
Well, I mean, to be honest,
explain what I'm talking.
To be honest, and this is another conversation, but the source is always sourced. So if a legal team went into a newsroom, they would find there is a named source for.
So how does she get away in court saying she knew nothing about it?
Well, you know, again, that's another story. But all I was saying is, and I'm not
going to argue that the police don't have racist people in. I'm not going to argue that. I'm not going to argue that the police don't have sexist people in. I'm not going to argue that. What I'm going to say is it's no more racist and no more sexist than anyone else. Listen, I'm a guy who's taken them to court and won my case, which is why I can say it.
Yeah,
on racism,
absolutely.
not on racism.
Okay,
so I'll tell you racism.
Let's flip this another way then. Let's flip this another way, okay? In this particular case, could the outcome have been improved via the police and the media having a better line of communication?
No.
Now, I'll just throw this out there. Listen, I'll just throw this out there before you start, okay? Right, one little thing to say before you start, okay? There was a time. There was a time in the olden days. Now, like not my days, right? But there was a time, you know, back when, and you'll find there are editors who wax lyrical about this, whereby, you know, before the press conference, like the police would say, right, come on, turn your dictaphones off, right? We'll level with you. These are the facts. Right, now here's the official press conference, but, you know, da-da-da. And so actually what Sky News are now saying, and actually this isn't the official statement from Sky News, but what some of Sky News reporters have come out to say, which is quite interesting, is that their point is if they had the information that the Lancashire police came out with at the time earlier, they would have reported the case in a slightly different way. Now, I know hindsight is a wonderful thing, but actually, think about that though. You know,
my position is this: I think they tell the press too much. My position is dead simple. You know, I had my full years in the service, except for the 2 years that you have to be a uniformed constable and roam the streets. All my years of in the special branch, we very rarely, if at all, spoke to the press, ever. Right? Our work was sensitive. It was the Cold War generally, so it was Warsaw Pact, Soviet Union stuff, etc., terrorism, IRA battles that we were having, etc., etc. We very rarely said anything to the press, right? Anything at all. So I put that down there because I am not the type of officer he was. But what I did notice was that I was a special branch officer, so I was doing a secret job. What I did realise was that colleagues in the CID were talking to the press all the time, right? And I don't think that's done them any favours. I think that's done them a negative. I think what's happened is that they tell them stuff, they make stuff up anyway. They and you know, they make a ludicrous situation, like example, talking about that female officer's dress when it's nothing to do with that. I think the police are poor at communication with the press, which doesn't help. They should have been saying from day one, there are 400,000 missing people every year reported as missing in the United Kingdom. Therefore, one of the big things the press are making a big thing of was, when you first got the message, you didn't pull out all the troops. Well, you can't, because if you pulled them out and that's only in England and Wales, by the way. When I say 400,000, that's England and Wales. Scotland have their own numbers and Northern Ireland have their own numbers because they're different jurisdictions. They've got different laws and they function differently. So in England and Wales, it's 400,000 missing persons a year. You can look it up. You know, it's between 375 and 450,000 people go missing every year who are reported as missing. So you've got to put a report in, they're mispers, right? So what I'm saying is that if for every one of those people, you basically pulled the troops out straight away and said, right, let's get everybody together, let's search everywhere, you'd never do anything but missing persons.
Yeah, and also
you wouldn't do anything.
Also, Carlton, also, right, you know, it. But by the middle of this, by midpoint of this, they had pulled out all the everyone that they could pull out.
Correct, you know? And this is the other thing.
And also, like, look, you know, yes, that's a whacking great stat of missing people, but also, like, when you come back to the unfortunate details that the police revealed about, you know, about Nicola's problems with alcohol and perimenopause, right? Like you know. Again, if the police suddenly pulled out all the stops for every woman that drank a bottle of wine and was over 45, you know, I don't want to be.
You see, they didn't even want to give that information, did they?
You know what I mean?
You're absolutely right, Fergus. They didn't want to give that information. You know, I was actually quite angry when they, after saying we will not give you any further information, when they did so some 6 hours later. Because I can understand investigatory why you turned around and said there are vulnerabilities, which is why we took it more seriously. And that's why we started working on it at a level we did, because there are vulnerabilities. That's fair enough. The question was then when they actually later on said what the vulnerabilities were.
Those two things as a standalone aren't really vulnerabilities. They're just sort of normalities.
No, yeah, true. But they'll read us on vulnerable, because what you have to understand is, and this is again where they don't explain. So what they said is that they sent a unit to her house, right? And on that unit was it's a medical and police unit that some of the police forces are trialling and put into place. So that suggests to me that there was a real medical problem, right? And you can figure what you might think it might be when they sent that unit to that particular house, right? That's the first thing I took from that. It's not my place to say. So the family.
No, it isn't. But no, it isn't. But you're right to say it because everybody's got their opinion. Right. You know, I would say that some.
When you send a mental health unit, because that's what that unit is now. In some forces they're trialing it, where they've got a mental health individual that drives with the police to deal with mental health problems. Because I said if I were the commissioner, I wouldn't go to a single mental health job again as a police officer. I wouldn't send any of my officers to. And I'll tell you why. Because they get hit every time for dealing with mental health problems, which are the most difficult things to deal with. I can remember, as I said, I was in a short period of time. I'm not going to play up the old uniform fella. I was there forever. I wasn't. I was 2 years. But I can remember in my probationary period of the 2 years, we had to go and pick up a woman with a mental health problem. And it took about 8 of us to carry her out of the house, spitting, screaming, biting. And then when that wasn't functionable, she started to urinate on the officers carrying her. Right?
Wow.
Anything to spray them with everything. So the reality, what I'm saying, and I was one of those officers carrying her, right? And she was put nicely in, no great shakes, but people looking would say, why does it take 8 people to pick up a woman? Because mental health problems sometimes orientate themselves that way. And so now, because police are taking hits on everything that goes wrong, because what I should stress, when you get a death in custody, right? What does that mean to you? If I say to you a death in custody, what do you think that is?
Well, yes, that's an interesting question. What I the press would probably imply that it was police negligence, but it probably isn't, is it?
But what do you think it is, though? Where is the custody? When I say a death in custody, what does that mean to you?
Someone's been put into a police cell before they can before they can be charged and
Exactly, Fergus. That's exactly what it sounds like. It isn't. A death in custody can be, as long as you've had police contact within 24 hours of that person's death, that is a death in custody. So if I now pick up an individual like that lady I just spoke about, and we take her to a mental health facility, and that individual dies 24 hours within time, then that's classed also as a death in custody. Right? It's nothing to do with police.
Gosh.
But it's just because police had dealt with that person at some stage 24 hours before. Right? This is the problem with the law. They don't explain these things to people. Right? So people automatically think, all these people dying with police. They're not.
That and again, that is a failing. And circling back,
absolute failing.
Going back to if this, you know, if there could have been a better line of communication, you know, what I feel a lot of the public, you know, there was certainly a huge level of kind of public emotion about the sort of I mean, you know, about the fact that the police, the inference was that they were blaming the victim, right? You know,
yes.
Saying that she liked to drink and she was going through something that every woman goes through. Sort of actually, you know, that wasn't enough information. None of these things are.
Where's the inference from that?
Yeah,
this is the point I'm making. Where is the inference?
What's the inference? What would lead someone to then take their own life? Now, I know that when we first spoke about this, you said to me the first thing that the investigating officer would have done would have been to
lifestyle investigation.
Investigation, and I feel that if that was done, and if that was done properly, that what the police actually announced was sort of very much a disservice.
Because they were keeping it private. They will have done the lifestyle straight away. That's the first thing you're going to do, because, of course, most people who actually lose their lives, right? So this is now losing your life. Most people who actually lose their life in terms of murders or whatever, maybe somebody's lost their life, maybe, or potentially has lost their life, the family can well be involved. So therefore, you have to do lifestyle, you have to look at backgrounds, you have to make sure that there's nothing that can suggest that, you know, the partner, man or woman, is involved in it, that any other member of the family is involved in it, etc., etc., etc. So you have to do lifestyle. They also supply individuals with a floor, don't they? Right? Family liaison officer. So the family liaison officer is generally a DC, detective constable, or even a PC, you know, will be put to the family, and they make a good liaison with the family, and the family then have some sort of rapport with them. But they're still police officers, so if they were to find something out that was incorrect, they'd have to report that, right? So again, that's another element whereby you can see where the lifestyle is. I'm suggesting to you that they knew what the problem was because, of course, when they did the log search, which you do as a basic thing as a senior investigating officer, you would look and you'd see, right, have we ever had any problems with this family before? Yes, we have. They sent the unit to them. Right, so there's probably maybe some mental health, whatever, and police elements. So that was okay. So they knew about that. Then the question is, do we tell the press about that? Well, the point is, no, you don't, because right in the beginning, we don't know the person's dead. We don't know where the person is. When she comes back, if she came back to her normal life, would you then wish for that to be known by all the public? No, you wouldn't. Now, the way I understood it, when they did actually say something, it was because the family had okayed it with the floor, with the family liaison officer, and said, yeah, you can tell people about that because it may be opportune to the case. Right, so originally it was, we're just going to tell you about vulnerabilities. We're not going to tell you anything else. And then subsequently, because the press kept going at them, I believe the family is supposed to have said, tell the press. Now, if it were me, I was a senior investigating officer, this is why I have one thing against her, I would have said, no, I'm not telling the press. If you want the press to know because they keep calling at you, you say to the press what your partner, your daughter's problems were. Not me. The way I understood it, they actually said in the end, the reason why we said what the problems were is because some people in the vicinity were going to sell their stories because they knew she'd had a problem with drink and leading to some type of mental health problems. So because the press again was nefarious and going around wanting to buy stories from people, that's why apparently the police said the family asked the police to say, listen, you can say what the problem was. I wouldn't have fallen for that. I would have said, no, if you want to tell the press we've done what we should do in our guidelines, you now tell the press what the problem is if you want to stop people selling their stories. That's what I would have said.
Absolutely true. But and again, these messages come with deeper sympathy because obviously, two children have lost their mother. But
absolutely.
But at the same time, if I would have probably owned this as the family, I would have probably owned this situation from the start. Now I know it's difficult when you're in that situation and heaven forbid that anybody finds themselves in that situation. However, I think that the sort of them and us situation escalated quite a lot because, as you say, because the police did then own that announcement, but actually that was 17 days in.
At the behest of the family.
Just imagine how this might have played out. Carlton, just imagine how this might have played out if at the very start, instead of saying, to all intents and purposes, normal person's mysterious, in inverted commas, normal person's mysteriously disappeared. If they said, person who we're a little bit worried about, maybe we had a fight last night, maybe she had a bad morning, maybe she had such and such, do you know what I mean?
Let's argue though, because as she always said, the senior investigating officer, this is one avenue, our primary avenue, but one avenue. Let's argue that she's found. Why should everybody know in the country what her problem, her vulnerability was? It's no need of anybody to know. So therefore, if the family wanted to put that out, great, that's up to them because they're the family.
And that is
not the police's fault.
That is 100% agreed. No, and yes, 100%, I'm behind you on that. But what I'm also saying is that the media was a useful tool in those early days to spread the message, for anybody, for any dog walker, for any whatever. Do you remember? Goodness, it must have been about 15 years ago. Do you remember that guy, Raoul Moat?
Yes, Raoul Moat. Yeah.
Remember him, right?
Raoul Moat. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you'd call. I don't know how many people you have to kill to be called a serial killer, but like he was a serial killer, right? But do you remember? That was madness as well, wasn't it? That was, and that was very primitive social media madness because there was probably only like MySpace and maybe Facebook back in the. It was quite a long time ago, wasn't it? But but he did. There was a he. The media had basically said at the time. There was a lot of information. No, there was a lot of information the police didn't give the media at the time. It was all quite staggered and it was all quite. But I'm not laying blame. It was a really bizarre case and there were lots and lots of things happening. But there was a point when the police sort of said to the media, if you print anything, this guy has basically said he's going to kill someone, because they found a note or they found something. This guy. He used to keep writing all these threatening letters and my recollection is quite sketchy on this, but there was but this guy had said at some point that that if anything was read in the media about him, then he was going to kill someone. And so the police had to then kind of go cap in hand to the media and say, like, please don't write anything because this guy's going to.
Well, no, what he'd done, if you remember.
But also it was mad. It was complete madness. Because do you remember, like, Paul Gascoigne came out.
Went to John the Fish on the bank on the thing. Yeah, absolutely.
He said, oh, I'll get him fried chicken or something.
Yeah. Look, basically the background to that, as I recall it, was that he had shot a police officer who subsequently was very badly injured and took his own life subsequently, as I understand. He said he was going to kill police because police had ruined his life. He had been arrested, and I think
because didn't his
wife took up with a police officer.
Partner said, but she was lying, wasn't she? She was just pretending that because she knew he hated the police, and then she said, my boyfriend's in the police.
Yeah, in order to make him feel fearful.
So he got shot.
So he went on a shooting routine, and he said he's going to shoot any old bill that come next to him, any police officers. For people not in the United Kingdom who don't understand what Old Bill is, which refers to Sir Robert Peel, hence Bill Robert, who started the new police in Britain, the Metropolitan Police in 1825. Anyway.
My God. Also, he said as well, like oh my God, like So the police said to the media as well that he'd taken some hostages. So the media couldn't. If the media put out a story
that I don't know,
then he was going to kill the hostages. But the hostages were actually his accomplices. People that helped him. Yeah, one of the people that helped him, which I don't think police knew in the beginning. But then later on, if you remember, he went into the woods and there was the biggest manhunt. And because we are to 96, 97, 98, depending on what county you're in, unarmed, you basically had police officers coming in from all over. That's right. Well, the police bought these mega weapons, didn't they? From like a really
particularly from Northern Ireland, where every police officer carries anyway, all the time, routinely. So they brought in a lot of people from the MPS&I Police Service of Northern Ireland to aid in this, and people up from the Met, etc., and from all the surrounding forces to track him down because he'd gone into some sort of wooded area, and and his intention was to kill police, and they knew that he'd shot, and his attempt was to kill officers when he shot them. Fortunately, they didn't die, but unfortunately, subsequently, it led to an officer's death. So that's why there was such a big concentrate of officers, really, because.
But also, Carson, the police bought some dodgy tasers off a company, and the guy that ran the weapons, the munitions company that sold them the dodgy tasers, killed himself as well.
Oh, I know nothing about that. I mean, if you look, you cannot use a taser against somebody with a proper firearm. It's totally and utterly useless, because the taser has got one shot in it. Now they've got one with two shots, but one shot in it, the prongs have to hit you. The prongs may miss you, but a guy with a proper firearm, in this case it was a shotgun which he had, and the problem with shotguns are, and I don't think a lot of people understand this, a shotgun can be something with 625 little balls in it, or it can be, depending on what you have in the cartridge, or it could be a cartridge with, 38 rounds in it, or it could be a cartridge with one single cartridge in it, which will basically cut you in half if it hits you. So a shotgun's an extremely dangerous weapon, depending on what it's loaded with, and you never know what it's loaded until it hits you. So people think, it's a shot, it's only buckshot, and they'll be all right with that. No, it's rubbish. Depending on what the individual puts in that cartridge, and he can put anything in it, and he can make his own. You don't know what you're going to be hit by. So it's extremely devastating weapon. Extremely devastating. The only positive about it is that the distance it fires isn't like the distance of a rifle, say. So that's your only advantage, but it's way further than a taser. So you see, a taser does not aid you in that circumstance. Now, a taser does aid you against a person with, say, a knife, as long as they don't close you down quick enough. You can, a person with a knife and an officer with a taser, if that knife man's skilled, he could be on you before you could taser him. But to me, if you give me a choice of weaponry, say I had a choice of weaponry and I was trying to deal with somebody and I wanted it to be non-lethal, and I'll explain this because, again, the press, and we'll talk about press and how things are going, the press sometimes says, oh, he had a taser and he shot him terrible. Right. My escalation of scale would be, first and foremost, if I was going to use, you have a baton which we call an asp, which is a piece of metal inside a ratchet. And when you rack it, it comes out further, but it's still a piece of metal with a round bob on the end that is also metal. I think it's highly dangerous. Hit somebody over the head with that and you can kill them. So for me, I would start off with taser first, because generally 9 times out of 10, you hit somebody, in fact, 99 times out of 100, you hit somebody with a taser, they go down, but they are back up again, frankly, within seconds once you stop tasing them. Right? So it's less lethal. So then I'd probably say gas, because that can spray back onto anybody. So not just the person you're spraying at, but the people about it. And then I'd say asp, and then I'd say a firearm. So if you wanted to look at scale, but the media, and this is what's important, looks at the taser and says, oh, that's the gun. So it's the worst thing that you can ever do, shoot a taser. And what you're doing, you don't need anything else. If you've got a taser as a policeman, then you're good to go. You're fine. It's rubbish. Because, if you were various things, a taser's got, the prongs have got to hit you. And if the prongs don't hit you, or you roll over and break the prongs, that's you back in play again. So there's oftentimes a real lack of understanding about how police equipment works, about how police work, about the rules and regulations. That big case they had about the strip search. You remember that strip search case about right. Well, a strip search officially. A strip search is any search other than outer clothing. So coat, jacket, it's coat, jacket, outer coat, that's it, outer coat, jacket, and outer coat, jacket, gloves.
In the Victorian ages when it was like,
yeah, well, this is your problem. This is your problem. So when people say strip search, you can actually just take off their outer coat, the jacket, and next minute you're already into a strip search. You've not stripped anybody. You're not stripping them naked. But when the person reads that in the media, strip search, their vision is, it's like something from a movie where they're in prison or something and they tell them to bend over and let's see, open your cakes wide, they say in the prison things. Yeah, that's what people's view is. That's not what officers are doing. Well, okay, that is not what they're doing. So it's a lot of the time, what's happening is the media is putting forward a position. The police are rubbish, police media people, rubbish at defending what the police do, right? Rubbish at it. And I mean, absolutely rubbish.
Well, you say rubbish, but one thing I will say to validate that is that their budgets are being massively slashed by the day.
Yeah,
like the police corporate comms, are probably on about a third of the budget they were on last year.
Yeah, probably right. Yeah, I can't argue that. But you see, but the point is, if you were to explain these things, it would be much better, because then people say, right, so we're not talking about that young lady having all her clothing taken off her, and some fella doing something. That this is the point I'm making. Or yes. We're not talking about what was the other example that I provided? These examples. This is how you've got to explain it. You've got to say, no, this is the vernacular. This is the language. Example, the guy who got shot, who had been terrorising the streets in southeast London. His parents had sent him up north because he was a bad lad and thought, we'll send him up north. And these are facts to get him away, and he got himself embroiled up north and then came back down. Well, the reality was that this fella was meant to be involved in getting a drugs deal going, getting himself a machine gun and going out to rob some Colombian drug dealers. Well, you're not going to do that without arming yourself up. So when they did the hard stop on him with that info, when the police said stop, they're thinking or seeing a machine gun's coming out here, and we're gonna lose our lives. Because for most of my career, I carried a weapon, right? I'm telling you, and people don't understand this, if you wait for somebody to shoot you, you are likely to be dead, right? So you need to understand that. It's not cowboy time. There is no position where you think, I'll shoot him in his arm and he'll be all right. First and foremost, you don't know if you shoot a fellow in his arm, he'll be all right. You may hit an artery and that's you done. But 9 times out of 10, when you do shoot somebody anywhere, the reality is there's an extremely heavy price in the United Kingdom to be paid. Nobody shoots anyone in the UK without that going to the court system, and the likelihood is you will be standing at the Old Bailey gripping the rails for your life because you're going to prison for the rest of your life. And I'm not bothered if that's righteous or not.
And to circle back to the Raoul Moat case, okay. I mean, he took his own life in the end.
Yes,
anyway.
he did. In the end,
like the police said they didn't shoot him in the first place, but then they did in the investigation say they shot him. Right. His brother said something like it might as well have been a public hanging, or it might as well have been a public execution or something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Rubbish.
Well, but
not true though, was it?
No. Of course it isn't. But just to draw a polarity here, because I'm conscious of time as all.
Sure, we got plenty of time. Let's run. We got plenty of time. Let's go.
But look. There was a former police inspector who was involved, who commented on the Nicola Bulley case. Zoe, I think her name was, right, and she said that her biggest fear is that women or people in general. She said her biggest fear is that people will now be afraid to report missing people, missing persons, because personal information might be revealed.
That's what I'm saying. But it won't be, will it? Because for 17 days, they didn't reveal any personal information. And at the end, and this is why I'm saying this is where the police need to get themselves a proper system running in terms of fighting back. They revealed her information because the family asked them to. Now, I'm saying I would have said to them, no, we will not do that, even though you're asking us. You reveal that information yourself if you want to get the press off your back. But the husband has been on and said they asked the police to reveal that information because they knew people were trying to sell their stories to the press, because the press were offering money to them. Right? So people in the villagers who supposedly are all friendly to the family, were wanting to sell their stories and what they knew. So this is the point. So that's why subsequently, after the vulnerability aspect, and I can understand why the police brought the vulnerability in, because if she was still alive, people need to understand there is a vulnerability there. Maybe, I know they thought she wasn't, but maybe if that just happened to be the case for whatever reason, you need to understand the vulnerabilities. So I can understand that, but they didn't say what they were. And the detective superintendent, she stood there and said, I will not say what it is. And indeed, the assistant chief constable said, I am not going to tell you what those vulnerabilities are. He was very, very clear. Leave that to me, he said to her when she started. I will not tell you what those vulnerabilities are. It was only then some 6 hours later that came out, apparently at the behest of the family, because they heard that people were trying to sell the story, that they said what the vulnerabilities were. So for that officer to turn around and say her fear now is, retired officer, I'm guessing, her fear now is that women won't report themselves because, first and foremost, women won't be reporting themselves missing, will they? Somebody else will be reporting the woman missing. Because if you're missing, you aren't making the report. Because if you're making the report, you're not missing. So that in itself is a bit
and writing letters 49 pages.
Yeah, exactly. So that in itself doesn't stand up. But anyway, look, if you're saying the families won't report because they feel that then their family business will put out, no, it won't, because for 17 days of the most tremendous pressure, as you admitted. So that was part 1 of this week's Black Spy podcast. And hope you enjoyed it. We'll have part 2 next week.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
More than a quarter of a century, I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.